Welcome to Age of the Geek, where we dive into TV and film and take a look at these projects through nerd vision goggles. We are your hosts. I'm Quiggs, and this is Dave.
Hello there.
So, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about our very first topic, which I'm very excited about, Obi Wan Kenobi on Disney Plus. Kind of worth mentioning, but there will be spoilers in these reviews.
Yeah, so after Obi-Wan left Anakin for dead on Mustafar, we jump 10 years in the future. He's hiding out on Tatooine, keeping his head down, has seemingly mostly cut himself off from the Force, and a young Inquisitor, hoping to draw Obi-Wan out, kidnaps Princess Leia. And after Obi-Wan rescues her, the Inquisitor, along with Darth Vader, pursue him across several planets. The Inquisitor is revealed to have been one of the younglings in the temple from the night of Order 66 and has been plotting revenge on Vader. Her revenge fails miserably. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan entrusts Leia with a group of rebels who specialize in smuggling Force-sensitive children, and Obi-Wan goes off to confront Vader alone. They duel. Obi-Wan is once again triumphant. He returns again to Tatooine, having reconnected to the Force, and now able to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn.
It was so good to see Ewan McGregor back again as Obi-Wan, easily one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the Star Wars universe, who is unfortunately only in about half of it.
Ewan McGregor kills it. He is amazing as Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was amazing as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels. He kills it in this show. How did you feel about it?
Overall, I wouldn't rank it one of the best Disney Plus Star Wars shows that are out there. I think Mandalorian kind of has it beat just a little bit. Just some of the choices they made, I think, creatively. Overall, I just because Obi-Wan is one of my favorite characters, it's kind of hard not to look at it with rose-colored glasses or rose-tinted glasses. And Hayden Christensen is so much better as Darth Vader this time around than he was as Anakin Skywalker. And I do think that part of that was due to the writing
Mm-hmm.
and maybe just his youth as an actor at the time. But I think he absolutely crushed it this time around. He was far more menacing as Darth Vader. He'd put in the work too to be Darth Vader. He put on something like 25, 30 pounds of muscle just to be able to look intimidating physically in the suit. And he just put in so much good work to do that. And I think he pulled it off nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own thoughts about Hayden Christensen in the prequels, which I don't want to dive into with this discussion, probably because I assume at some point, being the massive Star Wars fans that we are, we'll decide to rewatch and cover those at some point. Yeah, I think he did a great job. And, there wasn't a ton for him to do. A lot of it was him in the suit where they're using James Earl Jones' voice. But the moments he does get is good. I would have probably liked a little bit more flashbacks, but I think my overall thoughts were I liked it. I didn't love it. I would definitively put Mandalorian above this, but I don't think this was anywhere near as much of a mess as Boba Fett was. I would say it's definitely a passing grade, but it was disappointing. I was hoping for them to really knock it out of the park, and I don't think they did. I think episodes 1 and 6 are really strong. I think there are good moments in between. A lot of it feels like it wasn't refined. I think the kidnapping of Princess Leia was a great plot hook and a mission that made sense that would bring Obi-Wan away from Tatooine. And I honestly, my biggest thought after the series finished is kind of something that I have been feeling about almost every Disney Plus show, other than probably WandaVision or Mandalorian. Mandalorian is amazing. I think Moon Knight probably doesn't fall into this category, but every single Disney Plus show for Marvel and Star Wars, at the end, all I can think is, why wasn't this just a movie?
Which is an interesting point because I think they were originally planning to do a trilogy following Kenobi after the events of episode 3. And I guess with the creation of Disney Plus decided, you know what? We're going to go ahead and just make this a mini series. On multiple levels, I feel like was kind of the wrong move because I feel like a movie, and we've talked about this before prior to this, but I feel like a movie would have had a far better budget. I think part of the reason why, and I agree with your assessment that episodes 1 and 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi are the better episodes, and you
Yeah.
can tell budget wise with the effects and the scenery, like the scenic shots and all the panning and stuff, you can tell that they really spent a lot of their budget on the first and last episodes, especially the pivotal fight between Vader and Obi-Wan at the end. There's just so many, unique uses of force power there. Yeah, and you could tell that that was like a huge chunk of where that budget went to.
For sure. Yeah, so let's get down into the kind of the different characters, the big characters that we have in this show and kind of what each of their arcs are in the show. So, obviously, Ian McGregor, Obi-Wan, titular character is the first, right? And like we already said, I think he really nails the character. I mean, it's not a surprise. Like I said before, he's the one bright spot in the prequels throughout the whole thing, and I think he's even better here.
I would agree. I think I can't remember if it was in the first or the second episode now, but there is a scene when when Reva is chasing him and he finally makes it onto the transport ship with Leia. I believe it's the second episode.
That's the end of the second episode.
She lets slip that, yeah, she knows that Vader is Anakin and he's alive and he's coming for Obi-Wan. And he's just sitting in that transport ship and the shock is just plainly written on his face. And it's such a short snippet at the very end of the episode, but the way that he whispers the name Anakin and just the shock and sorrow and grief that is framed on his face is just amazing. That right there, that like small 3-second zoom into his face was very powerful to me for some reason.
Yeah. One interesting decision they made in this was to have him be a little disconnected, a little more than a little, I guess, disconnected from the Force at the beginning. I didn't hate it. I thought it was fine and makes sense if he's still kind of dealing with his last confrontation with Anakin. I could see him feeling very defeated at that time.
You would have to imagine. So he must have been, what, late 20s when Qui-Gon was killed, and he was told as Qui-Gon's last wish to take on Anakin as a Padawan. So they spent pretty much like a majority of their lives together as master and student. And to have to or to live thinking that you killed your brother, basically he calls him at the end of episode 3, to think that you killed your brother because he became the evil that you swore to protect the galaxy from, and that would just leave you broken. To have everything you ever loved, the entire Jedi Order, destroyed in one day by Order 66, I mean, that would break any normal person. And so it makes total sense for Obi-Wan to just be this broken man. And the one oath that he has left is to take care of and watch Luke. And so that is what he does religiously. He works all day, goes home, watches Luke, make sure he's safe. So that makes total sense.
I agree. Yeah, and what mostly surprised me by his lack of Force connection at the beginning of the series is that it really reminded me of Luke in episode 8, which I know is a very, very unpopular decision with how Luke was handled in 8. And so that really reminded me of that. And nothing I have seen in the discussion online or even heard from other people is that necessarily one of their complaints. I've heard complaints, but I haven't heard that complaint of, well, why is he disconnected from the Force? But I thought it was interesting they made that decision for sure. So let's talk about Reva, who is kind of another one of the main characters.
Right, played by a new actress to the Star Wars universe, Moses Ingram, who I think honestly did a fantastic job at being a very menacing Inquisitor.
Yeah, she is very menacing. I think for her character, the outline of her story is really strong. I really like the big ideas behind her story, and I think the actress does a great job. A Jedi youngling who managed to survive the temple attack and is like doing all these like terrible things as an Inquisitor now, just to get close enough to Darth Vader to try and exact her revenge. But we all know is doomed to fail since we know how Darth Vader's story ends. I think that's a great outline for a story. I don't think it necessarily comes together completely.
And I'm not sure, I'm still debating to myself if this show, Obi Wan Kenobi, was the right place for that story to be taken place
I
in.
don't think it was. I think they could have made a movie about Obi-Wan and they could have made a movie about Reva. And I think I would have liked both more than I liked this show.
I would agree because I feel like it was a little distracting seeing this other story that was also very interesting taking place at the same time. Now, I mean, some of it kind of ended up working a little bit. I probably honestly would have watched showing us, how she survived Order 66, what she did to survive, how she even became an Inquisitor when they're killing off Force sensitive people, like children and Jedi alike. Like I would have definitely watched that show.
Yeah, and then to have a climax, like the climax of that story, be her failure to assassinate Vader. It could have been a really like hauntingly beautiful end to her story. I don't think this was the right place. It felt like it was put in there to give this a little bit lengthier of a runtime so that they could make it a show instead of a movie.
Right. I would agree with that. And I'm not complaining about the extended runtime. I'm kind of a fan of more content, but if it's good quality content too. Like I would like the quality along with the quantity. But yeah, I'm not a fan though of how they ended her arc. Now,
Hmm.
it makes sense to me now the more that I've thought about it. At first, I was a little peeved because it didn't make sense to me that the Obi-Wan who started this show, this miniseries, would have left Reva alive because she is such a source of information and she's a loose thread that should not be left free. She knows way too much about Anakin. She knows about both of Anakin's kids, where they reside. So she knows way too much. And I was thinking that
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would say she knows about both of Anakin's kids. I mean, she's aware of Leia as the daughter of Bail Organa, but I don't think that she has any clue that Leia is Vader's daughter. I don't even necessarily think that she even knows that Luke is Vader's daughter. The way I read the end was really that the guy that she happened to meet earlier in the show, Owen, who she knew at the time was hiding something. I think that the message that she heard really just said, "Oh, this person is being protected by Obi Wan Kenobi," right? I think that to then make the jump that like she would know that that's Vader's son. I don't know. I think that is one of those things where the audience has so much information about it that it's very easy for the audience to make that leap. But like it doesn't actually make sense for her to know that information with what she's been given.
I see what you're saying. So she knows that they are of importance to Obi-Wan, but she's not sure of the connection between them and Anakin.
I wouldn't even say not sure. I would say there's literally nothing that has been presented to her that would give her any indication they are connected to Vader in any regard. I don't think that there's anything that says that she should know, and I don't think there's anything in the performance or the dialogue that would tell us she does know.
That's what I was thinking was, why would Obi-Wan leave her alive since she knows so much? And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, okay, so even though we didn't see a whole lot of it, we saw him kind of reaching out to Qui-Gon throughout the show, but even though he kind of abruptly opened himself up back to the Force throughout the show, he fully embraced the Jedi ways again. And so at the end, he shows her so much mercy, as is the Jedi way. And I thought that was kind of powerful in a day and age where it's kind of scary that my first thought is she needs to die because she is a loose thread and dangerous to the canon, so she should probably die off. I was thinking to myself, like, you know what, yeah, Obi-Wan kind of called me out on that. Nope, you got to show mercy to people, even people who have caused a lot of pain and suffering. She has her own atoning to do, and to be honest with you, if they made a show for Reva now showing like maybe her struggle to come back to the light side after the events in Obi-Wan, showing some flashbacks of her surviving in between Order 66 and becoming an Inquisitor, I'd probably watch that show. I feel like that would be a pretty interesting dramatic character show.
I would give anything Star Wars a chance, I'm not going to lie. But I would definitely give the show a chance.
Okay, let's talk about Leia because I think that the child actor that they got for Leia did a phenomenal job.
Oh, she killed it. She was amazing. I loved her. She was great. I love how she portrayed the character. I love how the character was written. I love the little subtle hints of her force sensitivity. With Anakin and Luke, their force sensitivity both kind of showed itself in their piloting as children. And with Leia, her force sensitivity is showing itself in her ability to read other people. And I think it was great. The girl did a great job.
Yeah, her intuition was phenomenal. And so one of the things that had irked me at the beginning was, okay, why is why is Obi-Wan letting this child take the lead so much on things? And I think a part of him, because he connected a little bit more to the Force to save her from falling off the rooftop. And I think ever since then, a little part of him kind of felt this burgeoning kind of Force abilities in her, and he trusted her intuition. Her choice to ride along with that alien led them to that rebel officer who was undercover as an imperial officer, and her intuition kind of led them in that direction. And I think Obi-Wan kind of trusted her to a fault with that.
Yeah, I also think that he sees her as family. He still views the Anakin he knew as his brother, and he was close with both Anakin and Padme. There's several times in episode 3 that Obi-Wan goes to see Padme, and they have several scenes together without Anakin there at all. I think that he sees Leia as family, and some of that, he's a beaten man, and she's a very forceful personality, and I think it makes total sense to me that he would kind of let her kind of get her way a bit, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of affection, but it definitely made sense to me.
Yeah, another thing that I had just thought of is, okay, so he started training Anakin when Anakin was about the same age as Leia was in this show. And I was thinking, wouldn't he know, or at least be able to recall maybe how he kind of kept Anakin in line? And then my other thought was, you know what? He always mentioned in the prequels that Anakin was kind of reckless and was always kind of getting himself into trouble. So maybe he just knew that it was a hopeless cause to try and keep her in line. And he knew more to trust the Force and follow her lead in things, which was interesting.
I don't think that he would want to follow the same path he did with Anakin either. He blames himself for what happened with Anakin.
Yeah, I was talking with some friends, and they had mentioned how annoyed they were at Obi-Wan just doesn't really do much, and Leia kind of just takes the lead. And my response to that was, well, he just learned maybe hours before that a man that he loved dearly, his friend and brother, was alive, and not only just alive, but the Emperor's right hand man in bringing terror and dread to the galaxy. He's on autopilot right now, dealing with that trauma.
Yeah, and I think Obi-Wan's motivation a lot in this is like, let's just get back into hiding. He's not really thinking as the Jedi Master or the General. He's thinking as a man who's trying to just keep Leia safe, keep Luke safe, keep himself safe, and get back into the hiding. I really like the conversation between Owen and Obi-Wan in the first episode, where Obi-Wan is saying that Luke should be trained, and Owen's response is like, you trained his father. I thought that was great. I thought it was cool to see them defending their homestead at the end, although I really could have just generally done without that scene. It was multiple scenes really, because it was interspersed with the fight with Darth Vader. I could have done without all of that, to be honest. We knew there wasn't a whole lot of tension there. We knew every single person survived that scene except for potentially Reva. There was no tension. We knew Luke was safe. We knew he couldn't see a lightsaber. We knew Owen and Beru definitely survived. I could have done without that scene, but I thought every part that Owen and Beru were in, they did really good with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just to go back on what you were just talking about, I think that whole last scene on Tatooine between Reva and Uncle Owen, Iparu, and Luke, I don't know if that even really had to happen. She could have maybe just shown up at Obi-Wan's place, dropped her lightsaber, and they could have had a conversation. I think that might have been a little bit more of a palatable ending for me, at least.
Honestly, I would have been fine leaving Reva's story ambiguous. I think that would have played better. If you don't see a body, they're not dead. Everyone would know she's alive, that she survived, right? But I think that would have played better. It would have left more of a wonder instead of that whole part that just kind of took away from the fight, honestly.
Yeah, it was very distracting. I did really enjoy how they copied that scene from Rebels. And you called it because we were talking about this before the show even came out, and you said, "Look, if there's one thing that I want them to do, it's this." And in my mind I was thinking, well, if they did this, then because Rebels is canon too, that would make it seem like Darth Vader is just casually getting his helmet cut into in lightsaber battles.
For anyone that has not seen Rebels, the end with Obi-Wan breaking Vader's helmet, where you see kind of half of Vader's face, and then you hear kind of the mix of the James Earl Jones voice. In Rebels, it's the voice actor. In this, obviously, Hayden Christensen. That whole part where you kind of hear both of them at once deliver the lines. I thought it worked great in Rebels. I both wanted it in this show, and also I couldn't understand why they would get Hayden Christensen unless they were to do that.
I think they pulled it off beautifully,
Mm-hmm.
especially with such a menacing line like, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did."
Yeah.
Fully encapsulating and enveloping his Darth Vader persona. And I mean, that part was just chilling to me. And the smile too, oh,
Yeah.
powerful. That was cool.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was great. I thought the flashbacks with Hayden Christensen were really good. I really liked the duel between the two of them.
That was a cool episode with those flashbacks peppered in.
Though I will say they really should have done something about de-aging. Hayden Christensen looks good. He still looks like an adult and not like a 19-year-old kid. And they didn't even go for like the episode 3 look with the long hair. You could have covered a lot, the scar. Like, no, they didn't even go for that. They went for the episode 2 look. So he's supposed to be even younger and so much more of his face is visible. It was a great scene, but it did take you out a bit like, all right, yeah, I can see the age here.
Unfortunately, going back to a point we already covered is budget. It showed in some places, and that's one of the places it showed. I mean, again, excellently choreographed scene, peppered in very nicely in terms of pacing and effect, but could have used a little more technology.
So yeah, I thought Vader was great. I thought he sounded great. It's my understanding James Earl Jones didn't even actually record lines for this. They used an AI to recreate his voice essentially.
That's awesome. I hope he still got paid though.
I have no idea. I absolutely loved when he first sees him and the line, "I am what you made me." I thought that was great. They didn't overuse Vader in this. I didn't feel as though Vader was being used too much. They didn't give him too much dialogue. Like the dialogue felt the right amount.
Yeah, and the sinister way that Obi-Wan just could not evade him was pretty good too.
Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor was introduced in Rebels for anyone who watched that show. His look is definitely a little different, but I understand it. He's got like a impractically unrealistically thin face. He would have had to have a CGI head if they wanted to make it look more accurate to the show Rebels. So I don't mind the practical look. I thought he looked really good. I thought the voice that he did sounded great. It felt right, and his whole speech in the first episode about Jedi hunting themselves because they can't deny their nature. I really enjoyed all of that.
Yeah, it was spot on. It was menacing. And you're right, they couldn't have really gotten the look down because not everyone looks like Peter Cushing, who, if everyone doesn't know, played Grand Moff Tarkin in the original episode for A New Hope. Yeah, not everyone has his facial structure. So of course, they couldn't pull off that kind of skeletal look that the Grand Inquisitor has in Rebels.
Yeah, but I thought he looked good. I thought he sounded good. This is where I think for me, it's where it showed that these were two different stories stacked on top of each other, right? Because everything Reva does in this show could have just been given to the Grand Inquisitor. All they really do with him is they stab him in episode 2, and it's like, oh no, he's dead, except for anyone who knows who he is, knows he's not dead. Then he just randomly shows up again at the end. It feels to me like Reva, her story, I really like her story. She should have just had her own thing going. And her role in this story should have been played by the Grand Inquisitor. That's my take. And the last character I want to talk about was Indira, the Imperial officer, who's from Game of Thrones. I thought she was really good. I think the actress is great. I don't feel like they necessarily gave her that much to do, but I liked her. I thought she did a good job. I thought that the whole path of these are people that are trying to protect the children that are being taken by the Empire. Disney has had this really constant story that has occurred in it was in Clone Wars even before Disney took over, but also in Rebels and I think some of the novels where force sensitive children are being abducted. I think that the whole idea, the whole concept of the path makes total sense to me. It was really good. It was just a side thing. I thought they were fine. And I thought she did a good job.
Well, speaking of the path and the new kind of start to the rebels, the origin almost of it that they introduced in that show. I thought that was interesting that they started out as kind of like a Jedi and Force sensitive smuggling group, which was interesting to me because the Rebel Alliance always seemed like a military coup sort of faction against the Empire, and it was interesting to me that they started out not as a military coup, but more as just a almost like a Red Cross, just trying to get the Force sensitive kids and Jedi to safety.
Well, you have to remember, as far as canon is concerned, the Rebel Alliance is an alliance of many different rebels with many different belief structures and main goals. We see this in the show Rebels, that there are several cells. Not all of them are focused on the same things in the same places. So I just view it as this is a piece of that alliance, but there are more militant groups if you look at like Saw Gerrera or even the main cast of the show Rebels. There are more militant rebel groups. And I think that there is room for both in the Star Wars universe. It doesn't have to be confined.
True. I just did enjoy the fact that we got a little bit more insight into what Jedi are now canon in the series. For instance, I mean, did you do any research about looking into the names on the wall or the lightsabers that were seen when Obi-Wan was walking around Jabim?
No, I haven't looked. I know that Obi-Wan mentions Quinlan Voss, who appeared in Clone Wars and is in the book Dark Disciple, which is a Clone Wars arc that was never actually created.
For the lightsabers, the most that I could find on them was that there's a lot of speculation as to who the lightsabers could belong to. However, the theory that I'm kind of gravitating more towards is because of the crate that the lightsabers are found in looks so similar. I mean, it almost looks copy and pasted from a recent Star Wars game called Star Wars Fallen Order, where these crates are basically the treasure chests that you can find equipment in the game and cosmetics. They said that all those lightsabers in that box are just the cosmetic attachments and hilts that are used by the character in the game.
Oh, interesting. That's a cool Easter egg. I didn't know that. I played that game, but I did not recognize it at the time.
So not necessarily saying that that character is canon, but just a nice nod to the gaming community of Star Wars as well.
Well, I mean, anything that Disney has released is technically canon. They have said that. All the books that Disney has published and the video games they've said are canon. There are some, especially among the books, there are some places where a later show or movie have slightly retconned, but nothing major. I mean, Cal Kestis is canon. He is. Do I think we'll see him live action? Probably.
That would be great. I would watch that show or a movie. So, some other notable names that Obi-Wan saw on the wall. Multiple sources that I found actually deciphered the writing on the wall and came up with a couple interesting names, a few of which I'll note here. Jin Altus, who was a Jedi who was very rash, and he didn't usually listen to the High Council of the Jedi Order, and so he didn't have his own battalion of clone troops. He wasn't a general, and therefore he survived Order 66 and ended up becoming, at least in Legends, which is the unofficial past canon that was in the novels and the books and everything, but has been replaced by the new canon, which is now the movies and the TV shows that have come out. So he was a part of, in Legends, he was a part of the new Jedi Order that Luke Skywalker started up again. There's also Tiberius Anderlock, who was also part of Legends, but apparently is now canon. He was a fantastic pilot who survived Order 66, and he ended up being in the Battle of Yavin, but died shortly after, killed by a patrolling TIE fighter squadron. Then we've got this one's the most interesting one of all. We have Roganda Ismarin.
You gotta love Star Wars names.
She was also in Legends, and she survived Order 66, but was found by Palpatine himself. He found her, and she became part of the Emperor's Hand, which in Legends is a group of.
They're basically the Inquisitors.
Right, yeah. In Legends, they were basically the Inquisitors, but more shadowy. They were more like assassins, and no one really knew about them.
They were Sith assassins, not technically Sith lords to keep Yoda's "there's only two" statement still technically true. The best kind of true.
Right, and to my knowledge, I don't think Vader knew about the hands of the Emperor. So she became a hand of the Emperor, and she eventually had a son in secret, who she tried to cybernetically modify as he grew up to make him stronger, more agile, more deadly. And her main purpose was to try and have him kill the Emperor for her because the Emperor had this hold on her. But after the events of episode 6, the Emperor died and her son turned on her instead. Tragic ending. But she was the most notable that was on the wall. So it was very interesting that that showed up.
Interesting. It is cool to see that after what they did with the sequels, that they are now picking and choosing things to actually put from Legends into canon, which I think they should have done from the beginning, where they, with especially the sequels, they took a stance of, we're just ignoring everything that came before completely, utterly. We're going to do completely our own thing. You're starting to see, actually, let's pick and choose. Let's take certain things and make it our own, but not ignore what came before completely. I mean, we saw Thrawn in Rebels, and seems a likely presence in the Ahsoka series that will be coming. So yeah, it's really cool to see them kind of take some of those Easter eggs.
It is. I have enjoyed. You are far more versed in the Star Wars universe than I am, but I have still enjoyed seeing some of the Easter eggs that I recognize here and there.
Yeah, well, especially Legends. I grew up reading Star Wars books when I was a kid.
One of the biggest, at least to me, one of the biggest Easter eggs was when Obi-Wan walks into that kind of Jedi graveyard almost in the Inquisitor's base. And there were some interesting polls that I found, again, doing a bunch of research and multiple sources on
Hmm.
the internet. And there were a couple stills that were taken right as he enters in. You get like a wide shot of this hallway. There's been a lot of speculation that so if you were to take that episode and watch it and pause it right as he enters in, up in the top left corner, there is a figure that looks oddly familiar to people are speculating this could be Mace Windu.
I hope it's not.
It'd be crazy if it was, but I hope he shows up in a Disney Plus Star Wars show, to be honest.
You want Mace Windu to come back. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Samuel L. Jackson as much as the next guy, but you honestly want that character to return to life.
Maybe he didn't die at all.
Yes, okay, true. Maybe he didn't die at all, but like, you want that to happen.
So the rumors are that if it was going to happen, it might happen in Book of Boba Fett season 2. And honestly, Book of Boba Fett needs a jump. It needs a kickstart, and I feel like that would be a huge way to bring in some views for a second season of that show.
I want to keep the episode to Obi-Wan. So the only thing I'll say about Book of Boba Fett is that the main issue with that show is really that it is narratively all over the place. It is constantly jumping, and not in a good way, like some shows have been able to do, where you jump around different stories or different timelines, but like, it is narratively a mess. I don't think just having Mace Windu in there would help it. I think they need to actually focus the story onto some, I don't know, personally, I don't want to see Mace Windu in any Star Wars stuff, unless like this new Tales of the Jedi show, right, where we're going to see a little bit of like Dooku's backstory, which is super interesting. I read the audio drama about Dooku's history, and Dooku's a really interesting character. We're going to get this animated anthology series about different Jedi. I would not mind seeing Mace Windu return in that, where we get to see some of the history of Mace Windu. But I don't want to see him to return to life from post Revenge of the Sith. I really don't.
That's fair. So a couple other notable names that cropped up in my research. We see Terra Sanube, who probably only people who saw the Clone Wars show would know. He was a wise old Jedi who helped another Clone Wars character, Ahsoka Tano, find her lightsaber when it was stolen by a thief.
Yeah, he's the only one I recognize. I recognized him immediately when they were flashing through kind of the close-ups. I didn't know his name, and even now that you said it, I probably could still not tell you.
Yeah, it was a deep cut. Another deep cut from Star Wars Rebels was Luminara. She was a Jedi that in Rebels there was a plot where she was used. Somehow they amplified her Force presence even though she was dead, and they used her to try and trap other Jedi. And it almost ended up working in Star Wars Rebels, which was also very parallel to that episode of Kenobi because it just that infiltration and exfiltration and the espionage, it played out just like a Star Wars Rebels episode, and that was pretty cool to me.
For sure.
Finally, there was a Jedi youngling, which, while sad to see, was interesting because he was the Jedi youngling from the very first episode who was in the same group as Reva.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, that's some of the interesting things that I noted from the episodes and was able to dig up thanks to the power of the internet. But I think my final thing that I want to say about Obi-Wan is one of my favorite things about him. Obviously, not just his character, but one of my other favorite things, the action. So Obi-Wan was always supposed to be like a really good fighter, very skilled with his lightsaber tactics. And so seeing him during that fight with Vader pull out that kind of Form 3 stance, and yes, I'm doing a deep cut here. Form 3 is one of the many stances or training forms that Jedi would go through while they were learning the lightsaber techniques, also called Saresu. Probably botching the name there, but we'll just call it Form 3. So that whole stance where he has the lightsaber kind of overhead with his right hand and his two fingers kind of out on his left, that's a Form 3 stance, mostly offense. And seeing that again, like he did that so many times in episode 1 and episode 2. He did it in episode 3. Clone Wars, we saw it all the time. And so seeing that again was kind of cool.
Yeah, I really liked the final fight with Vader and Obi-Wan. I liked the fight, if you want to call it that, between Reva and Vader.
Actually, yeah, I do want to call it a fight because
Yeah.
I love the fact that even though she had all that hatred, all that anger, it still did not match Anakin's. And it was interesting that he did not even have to pull out a lightsaber on her until the very end.
He literally just took her lightsaber and stabbed her with her own lightsaber.
You have entered the final boss and were utterly unprepared.
Yeah, that was great. That fight was awesome. I really liked it. I really liked the Obi-Wan Vader fight at the end. My only complaint about the Obi-Wan Vader fight at the end, it's that it was so dark. For anyone that doesn't know, these scenes are all shot in what they call the volume. They are using Unreal Engine, a game engine, to generate whatever environments they want and then matching set pieces to kind of blend into the environments. That literally could have looked like anything. It could have looked like any otherworldly place. It could have had like nebulae in the sky. They needed to do, I think they needed to make it more interesting. I think it was a really cool fight with really cool use of force powers, but it was so dark. The last time the two of them fought, they were fighting around lava. Don't do the same thing. Give us something new, but like do something interesting with it. Don't just like make it this dark place.
Easily one of the best choreographed fight scenes in a Star Wars movie was that Mustafar battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And they didn't quite replicate it as well as they could have. And I agree with you. It was dark. Not quite, Game of Thrones season ending, battle dark. It was really dark. And I think they could have done better. But you know what? Somebody took that original fight in episode 4 between Obi-Wan and Vader and
Oh yeah, that video is amazing.
right, and they changed it, they upgraded it and made it 100 times better. Longer, but 100 times better. So I bet you it's only a matter of months before we see an upgraded version of that fight.
Well, you know what I want to see is somebody to edit this just over 5 hour series down to like a 2 hour, 20 minute. And I honestly think it would be all the better.
Kind of like how somebody made a supercut of episode 2 where they kind of took out all of the love scenes between Anakin and Padme and made it just basically a murder
Yeah.
mystery with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I mean, and it made it better.
Yeah.
So I've got some trivia for you. I already have said some about it, which this originally was supposed to be a film. You even said before that it was supposed to be there was going to be a trilogy. However, what I read was that the reason they didn't make this a film was because Solo was such an utter financial failure. So when Solo did so poorly, they kind of shelved the film for a bit and then they ended up making it into a series. And it just makes total sense because I don't think like somebody over there at Disney Plus does not understand that a series has a different narrative structure than a movie because so many Disney Plus shows, specifically in the Marvel and Star Wars realm, with a couple exceptions, don't feel like they were intended to narratively be a series. They feel like they were intended narratively to be film. And I'm thinking that what's happening is they're getting pitched to these movies. They're not sure how they'll do in the box office. Maybe they're smaller stories and they go, hey, we have this new streaming service. Let's make this a series for our streaming service, which if you want to make it for the streaming service, fine, but make it a movie still, because it's still narratively structured like a movie should be. It's not structured like a series. And Solo is definitely not the worst thing Disney has made, though it definitely did the worst financially. And I'm sad that because of its failure, this ended up being a series, because I really do think this could have been so much.
I agree with you. It probably would have been cleared for a bigger budget, would have made more sense pacing wise, hopefully, if they had made it a movie. But we'll see. I mean, there is also an article that I saw the other day that they are planning on releasing this in theaters, a movie almost. So I don't know if they're just going to kind of cut the intros and everything and bundle all the episodes together, or if they're going to do some sort of a different cut. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I hope it's a different cut. Who's going to sit in the movie theater for 5 hours?
Right, for something that they've already watched.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we'll have to see if it's a different supercut of maybe they'll throw some deleted scenes in there or new content.
Yeah. Another piece of trivia for you. John Williams came back to write one theme for this show, for Obi Wan specifically. And he actually conducted it with an orchestra at Star Wars Celebration a couple weeks ago.
It was just the Obi Wan theme.
Yeah, it's the Obi Wan theme. It was actually composed by John Williams, and there's a video on YouTube you can find where he's conducting an orchestra playing the Obi Wan theme with like some footage from the show. In episode 2, the girl who gives Obi-Wan spice, who's like, I had a father once, or some line like that. That's Ewan McGregor's real life daughter.
There's so much you could read into that. Like, I had a dad once, and then the Star Wars fandom claimed him as their own. That's cool. I love when actors can get their kids into like minor cameo roles.
Yeah.
It just makes it so fun.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas's kids show up in the prequels. Ewan McGregor is 51.
Oh, wow.
He is 10 years younger than Alec Guinness was when he was filming A New Hope. And this fittingly takes place 9 years before A New Hope, even though Ewan McGregor looks way better for 51 than Alec Guinness did for 61.
I mean, 10 years, a lot can happen. Skin regimens and makeup have probably improved quite a bit.
Granted, but Alec Guinness definitely looks a lot older than 61 to me in A New Hope. But, you know, canonically, Obi-Wan has been spending almost 20 straight years, with minor exception, on a desert planet with 2 suns. So, you know.
It's got to be rough. It'll age you, especially if they continue along with the story, which could potentially happen.
Another piece of trivia for you. Hayden Christensen rewatched all the movies and watched all of Clone Wars and Rebels to prepare for his return.
It's nice to see when actors take things really seriously.
Yeah.
And I feel like so few actually do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was really necessary, but it is cool for him to take that time and really get to know where this character has gone since he last was playing it. One of the most interesting things to me was this series was both set and released 23 years after Phantom Menace. So,
Right.
so 23
That's
years
pretty
ago,
cool.
Phantom Menace came out. But also in universe, the events of Phantom Menace take place 23 years before the events of Obi-Wan, which I thought was a really, really cool. I'm going to call it coincidence, right? They definitely did not plan that.
Yeah, that's a very unique parallel.
Yeah. And the last thing has to do with the budget. So I found this on Twitter, Star Wars Garrison. Kenobi's production value, it was given a budget of $90 million, which is $10 million less than Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, and is definitely below a lot of the bigger shows that are going on, right? So Miss Marvel is over 150 million, Moon Knight is over 165, Picard 150, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek SN Worlds, both 150 plus million dollars. Stranger Things season 4, $280 million. So Kenobi with a $90 million budget, it's definitely below even Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, which is a little wild to me. And I think it definitely shows. I will say Kenobi needed more money for sure. It had a bigger scope. They went to way more planets. Way more was happening. Mandalorian, I love it. It's amazing, but it has a pretty small scope. I don't think, if you were to ask me which show should receive more money, I would 100% have said Kenobi. And I think the fact that you got Ewan McGregor, who is one of the biggest names in the prequels, definitely the brightest spot in the prequels, and just since then he's proved himself time and time again, and you're giving him even less money than those other shows. I think this really, really needed a bigger budget.
Right.
It showed in some of the CGI. Also, I think with a bigger budget, maybe they would have had the ability to put a little bit more effort, a little bit more time into the story, into the script, and really refined it better. I would say at very least the same that they're putting into their other shows.
I agree. I think you're right. Having two of, I mean, multiple really big name characters, Leia, Vader, Obi Wan Kenobi, having huge names like that in a show like this, you would think that they would want to put a little bit more investment into that.
Like I said in the beginning, I liked the show a lot. Did not love it. Definitely a pass. I'd probably rank it in the maybe like a C plus. It's passing grade, but it's a disappointment.
Yeah, in some ways it definitely is. But I mean, just to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen on screen again, phenomenal. I love the kind of redemption era that we're in with actors and roles right now, and a part of me does want a season two to see more, even if it's just not them together, like flashbacks of each of their characters. But another part of me says, okay, enough is enough. Let's have some new content following some new characters.
Yeah. So let's get into it, right? Season two. Both Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor are saying they want a season two of Obi-Wan. What do you think of that?
So, like I just said, I think a part of me wants it. Part of me wants to see more of this. But there's another part of me that says they can't really go anywhere else with the story, at least not together. Now, Obi-Wan did allude to he thinks he had a brother during the episode where him and Leia are kind of riding on the tram with the stormtroopers and the alien that's subservient to the Empire. He mentions that he thinks he had a brother, so they could go somewhere with that potentially. They could have Obi-Wan getting a little bit more involved with the Rebel Alliance because it's alluded in A New Hope that he was a little more involved than anyone really previously thought. So they could explore that a little bit. But if they keep having Vader and him meet and having battles, that's going to get old fast, and it's going to get really tricky canonically to say, oh yeah, they have really crazy epic battles, but somehow one of them just leaves the other alive every time. It's just going to get a little tricky.
Yeah, I will say I'm not 100% against the season two. I want them to put a lot more effort in this time into the story, into really developing a story that makes it feel like a series and not just a movie, which hopefully it would, right? If they're developing it for season two, then they're now thinking of it as a series, where I think this was originally intended to be a movie and became a series. But I agree, I do not want to see this time period Obi-Wan with this time period Vader. I wouldn't mind if they want to involve Hayden Christensen, which I'm not against. They do something to the effect of like an Arrow, where you have two stories happening that have very similar themes. Now they need to do better with it than they did in Book of Boba Fett, because the whole two timelines is perfectly fine as long as your stories are driving home the same point narratively and character wise. And I think they could do that where you have flashbacks to maybe the Clone Wars or something with the two of them together, and then current day where Obi-Wan is by himself. But I just don't think I don't want another this. Like I don't want it just again.
I would agree with that for sure. It would be very difficult for them to justify just rehashing the same things that this one did. Now, honestly, I think the budget would have to be way bigger, especially if they're going to try and bring back Qui-Gon Jinn for more than just a quick cameo. While very short, was still awesome. I had thought that we were only going to get his voice. That scene where Obi-Wan is contemplating, like, hey, I might have to go and kill Anakin right now. He like kind of reaches out and says, what do I do, Master? I have to face him. And I thought right then was when we were going to have Liam Neeson's voice just kind of ethereally drift out to him. But seeing him at the end of the season, I was like, that's amazing. It's not what I was hoping for. It went beyond, even though it was just such a brief moment. But that's another avenue they could explore. So mentioned it before, but in the novel Kenobi, which I guess is now legend, Obi-Wan is on Tatooine, doesn't come into contact with Vader, but he's in hiding, and he has to make tough choices about whether to help people out or not. Kind of gets involved with this town that is terrorized by creatures, and eventually there's a threat from a crate dragon, which, if you're a Star Wars fan, you've seen in The Mandalorian, and you know how deadly a crate dragon can be, but there's an epic, crazy part of that book where Obi-Wan faces a crate dragon alone with nothing but a lightsaber. And if they have that in a season two, I'll watch it just for that.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Right. So overall, liked it, didn't love it. If they're gonna have a season two, I guess we'll just have to see what their plan is.
Yeah. I'll watch it, but I'm less excited for season 2 than I was for the season 1.
Right. This wrapped up some things nicely and kind of bridged a gap in some ways between episode 3 and episode 4, so it did feel like closure to me. But if they want to keep going and if they can make some quality stuff, I'm in. I'll watch it.
Yeah, of course.
So next time, we're going to be discussing Umbrella Academy Season 3.
Yeah. Yep. Umbrella Academy Season 3.
Yeah, that'll be some interesting stuff. Crazy show. So we'll have to get into that next time on Age of the Geek. So thank you for joining us. Leave a review, that helped. But yeah, so next time join us for a review of Umbrella Academy Season 3. And thank you for listening to Age of the Geek.